They discovered the shocking reason why God struck Er down. Unveiling a forgotten biblical tale. Few knew what truly happened that night in the heart of ancient Canaan. The air was thick with a tense anticipation, the kind that gripped the villagers as they huddled around flickering fires. The sun had dipped behind the hills, casting dark shadows that seemed to whisper secrets. Whispers of a man, Er, who had captured attention and ire alike. Er wasn't he just any man, he was the firstborn of Judah, marked by destiny. His lineage promised greatness. Yet, here he was, unmoored in a world of uncertainty and sin. The atmosphere crackled, charged with an inexplicable foreboding. Those who knew him couldn't place their finger on it. Was it pride? Was it ambition? Or something darker lurking within? The night was marked by events that any witness would struggle to forget. It began with a great feast, laughter ringing across the valley, echoing against the cliffs. But behind the mirth, eyes darted. Furtive glances passed among the villagers. They sensed a storm brewing, one that would bend the very fabric of their reality. And then it happened. Er, struck down at the cusp of a toast, an unwelcome silence cloaking the celebration. The falling of his body was merciless, a thud that sent shockwaves through the souls gathered around him. Gasps of disbelief mingled with anxious whispers, the ground beneath them trembling along with their hearts. Everyone gasped. Some cried. Others fell to their knees. What does this mean? They wondered. Why has such a fate befallen the chosen one? Rumors turned into frantic stories. Some said he had angered God by defying divine law. Others suggested he dared to defy his own father, Judah himself, in a display of arrogance. Meanwhile, the echoes of Er's unexpected demise clawed at the hearts of the people. They felt a gnawing pit of fear take root. It could happen to anyone. As the moon hung full and pale above, casting eerie light over lifeless air, a sudden hush fell. A woman at the edge of the crowd, eyes wide and glittering with unshed tears, broke the stillness. We have forgotten the old ways. Her desperate cry shattered the tension, and the murmurs grew louder. Were they truly as favored as they thought, or had their hearts strayed too far from the path laid by the ancestors? Glimpses of divine anger seemed to pulse through the crowd, sparking uncertain dread. What was the source of this punishment? If hadn't been warranted such a heavy consequence, who among them might be next? Darkness mingled with fear, and nothing felt certain anymore. Could it be that Er's death was just a warning? Or perhaps a sign of a greater mystery, a boundary between divine favor and abandonment? The villagers pondered, their imaginations ignited. Tremors of apprehension coursed through them like wildfire, as they stood on the precipice of revelation and horror. And as dawn approached, a tension hung in the air. What would they learn from this tragic death? What truths awaited beneath the surface of their fear? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. In the quiet light of dawn, the village stirred uneasily. The shadow of Er's sudden demise painted the edges of their daily lives in hues of fear and uncertainty. As the sun climbed over the jagged mountains, illuminating the valley, the spectral image of yesterday's festivities haunted the thoughts of every villager. They whispered among themselves, grappling with unanswered questions that slithered in the corners of their hearts. Is it true, then? An elderly man asked cautiously, his voice barely rising above the morning breeze. Is it truly our sins that have forged this fate? The others nodded, a murmur of agreement rippling through the group huddled by the well. It seemed that doubt now formed an unshakable bond among them, tightening like the sinuously woven strings of an ancient bow. The village elder, a woman named Dinah, stepped forward, her face streaked with lines of worry. We have strayed from the covenant, my children. We indulge in comforts that distract us from the sacred. Her voice carried the weight of ancestral wisdom, echoing through the hearts of those present. God's favor is not assured, it ebbs and flows like the currents of the great river. Many of the villagers bowed their heads in silent contemplation, but a younger man, small of frame yet fierce of spirit, raised a trembling hand. But what about mercy? What of the kindness we have shown to one another? Ere was favored, could he not have considered those who mourned him? Dinah regarded him with a mixture of sadness and understanding. Mercy often comes cloaked in shadows, dear child. It is not our feeble attempts at goodness that warrant favor, it is the depth of our covenant with the divine that holds the true weight. In that moment, a flicker of light seemed to dance in every eye, carrying a fragile hope that perhaps there was more to uncover. Their collective breath hitched as whispers filled the air like morning fog, weaving threads of inquiry. What had done that had crossed such a line? Was it just pride that had drawn God's ire, or was the transgression deeper, lurking beneath layers of expectations and intentions? As the sun continued its ascent, illuminating the ground where lay lifeless, a profound silence enveloped the villagers. Suddenly, a child, no more than 8 summers old, stepped forward, her small hands clenching a withered flower plucked from the path. Maybe we must remember, she spoke softly, her voice carrying the weight of innocence. Maybe there's something he desires that we've forgotten. A ripple of recognition transformed the air, as the villagers exchanged glances. They remembered the old stories, the sacrifices that brought blessings, and the deep reverence their forebears held for the moments of divine encounter. What if that is the missing piece? Someone breathed, their heart aflutter with the possibility of understanding. What if it is not just about the rules, but the relationship itself? Yet, just as hope rekindled, doubt crept in. Had they neglected their prayers? Had they allowed the weight of worldly pleasures to overshadow their spiritual obligations? The burden of doubt bore down heavily. Each pondered the tensions between their desires and the divine will that directed their lives as children of Abraham. As the villagers began to scatter, each lost in their contemplations, Dinah watched them closely. She felt both the gravity and the fragility of their resolve. Would they rise to confront the shadows of their choices? And what of their future? Would they dive into a lament of remorse, or would they ignite a revival of devotion? The mystery beckoned, threading itself into every heart. There, in the land of Canaan, the echoes of Er's death lingered in the air, revealing more questions than answers, and as they stepped away from the cradle of dawn, each soul carried the weight of one unsettling question: could the mystery of God's displeasure guide them toward a deeper understanding rather than an escape from it? As the day waned and shadows lengthened, the villagers gathered under the ancient olive tree, a place of solace and wisdom in times past. The air was thick with unspoken fears and frail hopes, as they nestled in small circles, sharing their musings and concerns into the gathering twilight. The child's words, "Maybe we must remember," echoed in their hearts, lingering like a fragrance mingling with the sweet air of early evening. Dinah stood before them, illuminated by the gentle light of the fading sun. Her age-worn hands were clasped, a gesture of both supplication and resolve. "Children of Israel," she began, her voice steady yet filled with a tender urgency, "we find ourselves at a crossroads. In our distress over Er's death, we must seek what lies beneath the surface of our fears. Our hearts yearn not only for an answer but for an awakening." A murmur of agreement spread across the crowd, but there were furrowed brows and questioning glances. They had come together to find answers, yet the answer they sought seemed elusive. "If only we knew what it was that displeased God," a woman spoke, twisting a ragged piece of fabric in her hands. "Then perhaps we could make amends." Dinah nodded, acknowledging the yearning for clarity. "The stories we share hold weight and wisdom. We remember the times our ancestors turned away from the covenant, and we also remember the heart of God, a heart that desires relationship over mere rituals. Relationships, forged in the fires of both love and pain, are what shape our covenant." The villagers gravitated closer, their collective longing for understanding drawing them together like moths to the flame of her insight. They recalled the tales of their forefathers, Abraham, who stood before the Lord with boldness, Moses, who interceded for his people, and David, whose heart for God was both idolized and flawed. Each man experienced a God who sought connection deeper than obligation. A voice piped up from the back, uncertain yet emboldened, what if Er had forgotten this? The statement hung in the cool air, reverberating with the weight of possibility. Perhaps in his pride or desires, he bypassed the divine connection and instead pursued his own ambitions. The group fell silent, turning the notion over in their minds. The implications contorted their collective notion of Er's life. Had his journey led him not into the arms of God but along a path of personal elevation? Dinah's expression softened, as the flicker of understanding danced in her eyes. He may have become ensnared by the desires of the world, as we too can easily be. A wave of guilt washed over them, the realization settling heavily. They remembered moments of pettiness and ambition, times when their hearts wandered from the sacred, seeking validation through worldly achievements, leaving behind their connection with the eternal. But how do we return? The young man from earlier spoke again, desperation fueling his tone. How do we remedy this breach? Again, Dinah felt the weight of generations on her shoulders. We must turn our hearts back to God, she replied, her voice steady. With humility and repentance, we open ourselves to the covenants that give us life. The villagers raised their eyes toward the sky, the first stars glimmering like promises overhead. Each face reflected a yearning for transformation, but along with that hope, insecurity nagged at their hearts. Could they truly shift their paths? Was it too late? The gravity of their history loomed large, and yet the promise of a new beginning hung tantalizingly close. As the evening deepened, they began to share their own stories, moments of neglect, encounters with grace, victories overcome by despair. Their words flowed like an ancient river winding through centuries, pulling them together in vulnerability and reverence. At the fading end of their gathering, Dinah posed a lingering question, one that would echo in the recesses of their minds long into the night. If Er's tragedy serves as a pale reflection of our own hearts, how might our repentance shape not just our future, but the legacy we leave for generations to come? A silence settled over them, profound and unsettling, as everyone wrestled with the significance of the night and the whispered promise of renewal. As the stars blinked timidly in the ink-stained sky, the villagers sat in a contemplative hush beneath the ancient olive tree, leaning against one another, their hearts stirred. The storytelling had awakened a quiet ember of hope, but the question lingered like a shadow despite their shared acknowledgement of the darkness within. It was in this pregnant pause that a stranger walked into their midst, a man clothed in a simple tunic, with weathered hands and travel dust upon his feet. His eyes, however, held a fire that seemed to illuminate the very night. As he approached the olive tree, the villagers instinctively parted, sensing an unspoken authority in his calm demeanor. He regarded them with a steady gaze, his expression warm yet piercing. "I hear the echoes of grief and grappling questions," he said, his voice rich and inviting. "What troubles your hearts on this night?" Dinah stepped forward, her spirit both curious and cautious. She recounted their plight, the tragedy of Er, the unease of their own souls, and the yearning for reconnection with God. "We seek understanding, for each heart feels the weight of this loss." The stranger listened intently, and as he did, his brow creased with thought. "In your quest for understanding, have you not considered what Er's life might reveal, not just about him, but about yourselves?" His question hung in the air, pregnant with possibility. He continued, unfurling the tale of Er with an air of solemnity. Er's life was marked by gifts. He, too, was called to draw close to the Creator, yet his heart grappled with temptation and pride. He let the abundance of his father's blessings overshadow the need for humility and service. He desired to be larger than life, to stand atop the world's stage rather than dwell in the quiet presence of God. The murmurs rippled through the gathered, for they recognized the mirror of Er reflected not just a life lived but shadows similar to their own. The stranger pressed on, "In our walk of faith, we often forget that our places of abundance can become the very dens of downfall unless tethered to grace." As the villagers absorbed this revelation, a young woman, her eyes bright with understanding, asked, is it not easy to get lost in our own desires? Can we escape heir's fate? The stranger replied with a gentle firmness. The way to redemption is not found in fear of failure, but in the courage to embrace vulnerability. Each of you must take the step to renew your commitment to what you hold holy. It is not mere rituals that draw you back, but the state of your heart. Seek in trust, and you shall uncover your way. The air was thick with tension as a realization unfolded among them, the gravity of individual choices pressing upon their community. With each word, the stranger was pulling threads of understanding from the depths of their hearts. As they began to share in a discussion, voices overlapping, someone called out, challenging their assumption, but isn't there a mechanism of grace, something that protects us from our darkest inclinations? The stranger smiled, a flicker of recognition passing through his eyes. Ah, grace is both the shield and the sword, yet it requires you to wield it with sincerity. God is not a distant judge, he desires to sift through your hearts, to free you from the burdens of the past. The path to grace has always been paved with the sincerity of repentance. Night deepened further, and as crickets serenaded the gathering, the villagers began to question their foundations, especially the long-held belief that there might be a fatalistic thread woven through their suffering. The stranger's words had laid bare their hearts, but a new question, one that seemed more daunting than any before, emerged. What, then, will forgiveness cost us? For the heaviness of our past weighs down our future. How do we reconcile our desire for mercy with the truth that we must change? The stranger's demeanor softened, and he gestured gently toward the olive tree, a symbol of peace and endurance. True change arises from acknowledging both the burden of your stories and the potential for renewal. You must ask yourselves, what is worth surrendering for the sake of restoration? A silence enveloped the villagers, the gravity of the question sinking in. The night air crackled with the tension of unresolved fears. As they contemplated their internal landscapes, a singular thought flickered in unison: was it indeed the place of shame, or the journey toward grace, that would ultimately shape their legacy? And so, beneath the stars that seemed to listen, they lingered in the question, their hearts hanging delicately in the balance of possibility. As the lingering stillness enveloped the gathering, the stranger stepped aside momentarily, allowing the weight of his words to settle in the hearts of the villagers. Shadows danced beneath the olive tree, mingling with flickering thoughts, restless questions echoing around like lost spirits seeking solace. Each villager felt the impact of an unwritten story wrapped around the whispers of their collective existence. What was it that compelled Air to forsake not only God but his very essence? Finally, after a time that felt both fleeting and interminable, a stoic elder named Samuel rose from his place. With a voice that rolled like thunder yet held the softness of rain, he inquired, if we are to uncover the truth of Air's demise, what must we face in ourselves? For in contemplating him, we seek a deeper understanding of our lives. The stranger turned toward Samuel, his gaze piercing yet gentle. The tale of Air is not merely a history lesson, it carries the weight of eternal truths, warnings cloaked in flesh and blood. Air was not struck down solely for his pride, his greatest failing lay in denying the truth revealed to him, the blindness that followed a disdain for humility. The gathered villagers leaned closer, as if drawn by an unseen thread of revelation. The soft murmur of excitement washed over them, each heart fluttering with anticipation. The stranger continued, in his arrogance, Air dismissed the counsel of those who sought his good. He silenced the voices of warning, grasping instead onto fleeting gains and lures of power. His heart, once a vessel for divine purpose, became a parched landscape, devoid of faith and overflowing with self-deceit. At this, a young boy named Eli, who had been quiet until now, asked in a timid voice, "Are we not equally guilty of turning away from those who love us? Is there a shield we can wear to protect ourselves from folly?" The stranger knelt down before Eli, meeting his gaze at eye level. "Ah, little one, the armor you seek is woven from the threads of community, vulnerability, and open hearts. Repair is not a solitary path, it is forged in companionship and grace. The shield against folly is one you must carry together with your kin. Alone, isolation breeds fear and pride, but together, humility serves as your guide. As Eli pondered the gravity of this truth, the air grew heavier, charged with unexamined paths that lay before them. One by one, villagers shared stories of their own turning points, moments when they had succumbed to pride or ignored the wisdom of their elders. These confessions hung in the air like fruit ready to be harvested, ripe with lessons that they had long swept aside. Among the shared reflections, a woman named Miriam spoke with solemnity, "Yet, what of those who do not seek to divide but instead strive to unite? Is Er's story our potential downfall, or is it a mirror to redirect us? How did he slip so far that he could no longer discern his path?" The stranger stood tall once more, his demeanor calm yet resolute. Er's path was a climb, one that spiraled inward rather than toward the heavens. He stopped seeing God in others, ceased hearing the whispers of his conscience. The further he wandered into vanity, the dimmer his sight became. This danger exists for all. It is the temptation to define oneself apart from the community, from the holy bond of creation. As night deepened, an ancient sense of mourning wrapped around the villagers, a dawning awareness that the heart of their struggle lay intertwined with longing, the longing for true connection, for forgiveness that reached beyond words, rooted deeply in actions of reconciliation. But even as they shared, a question emerged, echoing louder than the rest. If Er's downfall was in denying the voices that sought to save him, how do we ensure we do not follow his path? How do we remain vigilant in our hearts against pride's whisper? They pondered the gravity of their own actions, their eyes reflecting both fear and hope. As the stars shone brighter above, illuminating the darkness like divine watchmen, the essence of grace flickered at the edge of their souls. In this moment, there lay an unspoken, lingering recognition that the journey toward understanding would require not just collective introspection but a deeper search for meaning within each gaze they cast upon one another. Would they dare to tread the path of humility, to let their unique stories converge into a greater narrative shaped by love and grace? Or would they linger in the shadows of the past, repeating the cycles of Er's pride? The night, still thick with unanswered questions, left them all silently reaching toward a collective truth, a truth hovering just beyond their grasp. What it might bring, and whether they would find their way, this remained to be seen. As the stars twinkled with cosmic wonder above, the villagers remained in contemplation, bound together by the words shared beneath the ancient olive tree. The air, thick with unarticulated fears and lingering regrets, seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Amidst the stillness, the stranger's presence felt both ancient and immediate, as if he had been woven into the fabric of their narrative long before he had arrived. Eli, still perched upon the edge of innocence, broke the silence that clung to the night. If was so blind to the truth around him, could it be that there are truths we, too, all refuse to see? What if there are shadows within our own hearts that need to be examined? His voice trembled slightly, echoing the vulnerability felt by the group. The stranger knelt once more, his voice a gentle river flowing through parched lands. Indeed, dear Eli. A truth acknowledged is a seed planted in the soil of humility. Consider how faith can be both a lantern in the dark and a mirror reflecting our imperfections. Are there areas of your lives where you wear the veils of ignorance, shielding yourselves from the light? As the question hung in the air, villagers exchanged glances, memories flickering through their minds like dimming stars. Each one carried a weight, an inner story cloaked with burdens held too closely, fears too deep to utter. It was in their silence that the stranger sensed the electrifying potential for transformation. Then it was Samuel who spoke again, a tremor dancing in his voice. The paradox, then, is this: in striving for understanding, do we not risk revealing uncomfortable truths about ourselves? What is the cost of such revelation? With a nod, the stranger replied, unraveling the threads of one's identity can provoke vulnerability, but it is through vulnerability that hearts are opened. Do you not see? It is through acknowledging our common frailty that we rise together. The fear of exposure often eclipses the light of healing. Yet what keeps you in darkness will ultimately suffocate your spirit. Miriam, emboldened by the stranger's wisdom, gently added, and perhaps it is in the act of sharing our stories, our failures, our lessons that we can construct a new reality. If fell into loneliness, could the antidote be found in connection? Yet how do we carry the weight of our shame and still seek unity? The stranger's eyes glimmered with understanding. You will find that shame, when shared kindly, transforms into redemption. Take heart, for it is within the stories of wounds that the salve of grace resides. When you share your burdens, they no longer weigh on a single soul but become a tapestry of resilience binding the community together. Yet, in the depths of their hearts stirred a restless doubt, unquiet and persistent. Eli spoke once more, but what if we do not recognize the path of error in ourselves until it is too late? How do we stay vigilant against the slow creep of arrogance? This time, the stranger allowed a moment of silence to envelop them, reflecting on the weight of their inquiry. Awareness is your shield. Begin with gratitude, and let gratitude guide you. When you learn to celebrate what is before you, the love, the laughter, the lessons, you cultivate a spirit of vigilance against pride. In honoring others, you lift the veil from your own eyes. As the villagers pondered this truth, they felt an insistent stirring within, questioning the layers of their identities they had erected in fear, a sense of longing to break free. A desire resonated in the air, a yearning for transformation that hovered just out of reach. With the gathering darkening into deeper shades of night, the stars watching overhead like silent witnesses to their souls, a question lingered within each heart: can we allow ourselves the humility to unveil our own shadows, to name the pride that coils within us? Will we dare to embrace the discomfort of truth and stretch toward one another in vulnerable openness? As they sat in the unfolding mystery of realization, the stars above flickered with ancient wisdom, urging their souls toward a shared destiny. And among the questions, the search for connection loomed foreboding yet radiant, like a lighthouse guiding them through uncharted waters. Would they have the courage to navigate the rocky shores of their truths? As silence enveloped the gathering, the stranger stood, seeming to absorb the weight of their reflections. With a glance upward, he invited the villagers to follow his gaze toward the vast expanse of the heavens, a canvas splattered with the brilliance of celestial bodies spinning tales of time and faith. "Do you see those stars?" he asked softly. "Each one holds a story, entwined in the divine narrative of creation. Like those stars, your lives are threads woven into the great tapestry of existence." The villagers exchanged hesitant glances, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. The intimacy of their vulnerability had stirred the air into a current of anticipation, urging them to dig deeper into the recesses of their hearts. It was Miriam who dared to break the spell, her spirit igniting a curiosity that could no longer lie dormant. What stories lie hidden among the stars? If they mirror our own, could there be a deeper lesson in Er's fate than what we see at first glance? With a nod of appreciation for her courage, the stranger began to pace slowly, his presence growing more commanding. Er's downfall, while steeped in mystery, is a reflection of a greater truth: the necessity of community and the dangers of isolation. His heart shielded by pride, he drifted into a chasm of loneliness, unable to recognize the threads that bound him to those around him. How is it that one man can be so insulated from the love of others that he forgets he is part of a community? Samuel, unable to quell his thirst for understanding, sought clarity. But what of the rules and expectations we burden one another with? Are they not also a source of pride, drawing comparisons that can isolate rather than unite? The stranger turned at this, a flicker of approval in his eye. "Indeed, Samuel. The weight of expectation can be an iron yoke upon your spirit, yet there is also lightness in shared accountability, a bond woven through love rather than judgment." The anguish of Er's journey lies not merely in his actions, but in the silence that surrounded him. Each neglected story, each unsaid word, accumulates like dust on a neglected shelf. How often do you leave unspoken those truths that would illuminate another's path? A hush fell over the assembly as they absorbed the implications of his words. Eli's voice emerged from the depths of contemplation, trembling yet firm. "So, if shame and pride isolate us, how do we cultivate a space of belonging where secrets can cease to plague our hearts? How do we ensure that we do not turn away from one another as did?" The stranger's eyes softened, reflecting the flicker of hope that glimmered in the darkness. "It begins with seeing. Every heart holds a story yearning to break the surface. In each encounter, you carry an opportunity to extend grace rather than judgment, to create a sacred space where truths can emerge. Remember, vulnerability is not a weakness but the pulse of life itself. It is the experience that binds you together, and in embracing it, you cultivate a sanctuary for others. Gathered in the embrace of the night, the villagers felt their hearts swell with both longing and uncertainty. Miriam leaned closer to the stranger, her voice a whisper. But what if leveraging this connection leads us to open wounds our own or those of others? Is it not easier to maintain distance lest we bare our souls to the storms that could arise? Every journey of healing invites discomfort, the stranger responded, the sincerity of his gaze piercing through the chaos of their doubts. Yet, it is within discomfort that you will often find transformation. What lies in the shadows of your hearts does not have to be faced alone. As you lean into the stories of one another, that which binds you in pain can become a source of collective strength. As the stars twinkled their eternal dance above the gathering, the villagers felt the snippets of hope and despair intermingle within them, a stirring of possibilities unspoken. They understood now that the essence of Heir's demise was less about condemnation and more about the importance of interwoven lives, the stories waiting to be shared. And so, within their minds, a new question swirled, beckoning with both promise and unease. As we light the way for one another, how do we develop the courage to not only share our own stories but also to attend to those whom we fear may draw us into the depths of their pain? Will we embrace this call to empathy in the face of discomfort, or allow fear to continue separating us? The quietude of the night lingered, a palpable whisper wrapping around each villager, urging their hearts to unveil deeper truths. As the stars continued to cast their glow, a ripple of unease ebbed from the stranger, who now stood thoughtful, gazing into the vastness above. Look again, he beckoned, as if a moment of revelation hung just beyond their understanding. Those stars are not just stories, they are reminders of trials endured and lessons learned. Shall we not ponder the purpose of Heir's lesson? For in the darkness, we may uncover the brilliance of understanding. With that, the deep silence sharpened, each villager feeling both the weight and the promise of the path heaving forth from within the uncharted territory of their hearts. Miriam responded first, her hands clenched gently in front of her, reflecting the struggle within. Are you suggesting that Heir's fate was not merely a punishment but rather a wake-up call? A lesson the community was meant to learn? The stranger nodded, the gravity of his intention sinking into their collective awareness. Indeed. To reveal the often unspoken truth, in his failure, there was a deeper calling to awaken you all. How often do you find yourselves blind to the suffering around you? Is it not easier to witness calamities from a distance, judging the story rather than embracing it? Samuel's brow furrowed, as he leaned in closer, a tinge of urgency creeping into his voice. But if ponderings lie too close to judgment, how can we discern the line between holding one another accountable and fostering shame? Heir's story felt heavy with consequence. Aren't we warned by his downfall not to tread too close to those shadows? The stranger's gaze softened as he inhaled deeply and spoke with a quiet passion. To judge is to remain separate, to hold one another in grace is to seek communion. Heir stumbled on forbidden lands not merely as an individual but as a reflection of the fears latent in the heart of his community. There is no greater error than to overlook the hidden wounds of others, especially when we, too, are acquainted with despair. In the stillness, Eli wrestled with the unfolding truth. Healing requires light, yet, the shadows can be daunting. Are we called to bear burdens that strike us with fear? Can the path of authenticity invite not only our own vulnerability but also the weight of another's pain? Yes, the stranger affirmed, a fervor igniting his words. It is within this act of courage, both shared and individual, that true transformation arises. The fear of opening wounds will always exist, but every crack bears the potential for new life. What growth might await if you welcomed the stories of others, wrapped in love and understanding? The villagers fell silent, grappling with the enormity of the challenge presented to them. The stark contrast of community versus solitude hung delicately between them, and with every breath the stranger took, he breathed life into dormant thoughts and feelings hidden within. Miriam then raised her voice, a trembling inquiry born from the depths of reflection. If we are to engage with one another's pain and service, where then does one find the strength during moments of uncertainty? How can we extend our hands when we ourselves feel so fragile? With eyes shimmering like the stars above them, the stranger offered a gentle response. It begins with the realization that none are alone in their despair. This journey is not about becoming saviors, but rather, discovering that your stories intertwine. In community, you find the strength to bear witness and to share burdens without losing oneself, for communion is a tapestry woven from both joy and sorrow. And as the word settled, they found a quietude that spoke volumes of what was unacknowledged. Each villager reflected on the weight of their own untold stories, mingling with the burden of shared existence. The spark of realization glimmered in the depths of their souls. Perhaps, like Er's tale, their lives were also an intricate lattice of light and shadows, ever hopeful and ever challenging. A collective murmur of contemplation swept through them, a reflection surfaced, leaving them teetering at the edge of new understanding. In seeking the light to guide one another, can we also embrace the shadows and find unity in our fragility? Or will we, haunted by fear, continue to unravel the bonds that tether us to one another? As dawn's first light began to warm the cool night air, the villagers sat in contemplative silence, each lost in their thoughts, as the stranger's words echoed in their hearts. It was a new day, yet the shadows of the past lingered, demanding attention. One by one, they began to emerge from their inward reflections, primed to explore the significance of Er's downfall. Seizing the moment, Ruth cleared her throat, her voice rising gently like the sun breaking over the horizon. If our understanding of Er's fate is woven with threads of greater purpose, then what might that say about our own journeys? Are we to assume that every misstep carries a lesson, a divine whisper urging us toward growth? The stranger nodded, his gaze drifting to the rising sun, a reminder of hope. Each life is a canvas painted with colors both vivid and muted. The strokes of triumph and despair often dance together, revealing patterns that might otherwise remain obscured. But to recognize these designs, you must delve deeper into the essence of your experiences. Simultaneously, Simeon, who usually shied from group discussions, found himself emboldened by the unfolding conversation. What if we are not only called to reflect on our journeys but also to notice how those journeys intersect? How might our lives resonate with another's, causing ripples beyond our immediate view? Er's demise may not stand alone, it may echo within each of us. The stranger smiled at Simeon's insight, catapulting the mood toward a fervor of curiosity. Indeed, every choice, every act of judgment or grace, reverberates through the fabric of your community. Consider how your individual struggles provide strength to the collective. When you share your vulnerabilities, you invite others to do the same. Is that not the essence of true communion? At that moment, a hush fell over the group as the resonance of his words began to take root. They exchanged knowing glances, discovering the unbreakable threads binding them. But Miriam, ever perceptive, sensed a deeper layer. Yet, if we connect our stories too closely, could we risk losing our identity in someone else's pain? What about those who choose silence, who fear exposure? The stranger leaned forward, his eyes glinting with understanding. That is the essence of the journey. You do not lose your identity in service to others, but rather, you deepen your understanding of self. In recognizing the narratives of others, you gain perspective on your own struggles. The question remains, though, how do you navigate the delicate balance of holding space for both self and other? From the back of the group, Eli, still grappling with the burden of uncertainty, broke the silence. In our haste to support one another, do we trample on the delicate grounds of someone's healing? Are we not sometimes overwhelmed by the weight of another's sorrow that we withdraw instead of reaching out? How does one become a source of strength without becoming a crutch? The stranger paused as dawn stretched further, illuminating the faces of the villagers. The path of vulnerability does not demand perfection, it seeks authenticity. It is in your willingness to be present, to listen, and to honor another's pain, that healing begins. You must remember that true connection is born from the imperfect dance of both giving and receiving. In this moment, a flicker of understanding ignited among the villagers, illuminating the shadows that lingered. They began to realize that bearing witness to one another's stories was not merely about solving problems but participating in the sacred act of being human. And yet, an unspoken question loomed large in the air, a challenge still unresolved. Can we truly engage in the interconnected tapestry of our lives, weaving our stories together even in the face of our vulnerabilities? Or will we allow the fear of entanglement to keep us isolated, adrift in our own pain? As dawn broke over the village, a new awareness shimmered in the hearts of the villagers. They gathered in quiet circles beneath the ancient olive tree, the sacred air around them thick with a blend of insecurity, hope, and newfound desire to forge deeper connections. The lessons gleaned from Air's tragic fate had opened a wellspring of desire to confront their choices, sparking a flame of collective aspiration. With each shared story that emerged, their vulnerability invited a greater understanding among them. Each villager found strength in the recognition that they were not alone in their struggles, and as they aligned their hearts towards grace and humility, the threads of their stories began weaving a vibrant tapestry of community. It became clear that feigned isolation was a veil woven from shame, while true connection flourished in the garden of shared pain and joy. Yet, lingering in the air was that tender question: could they retain their individuality while intertwining their lives so intimately? As if sensing their hesitation, the stranger among them encouraged them to look inward. To connect deeply does not mean you dissolve into one another, he reminded gently. Rather, it is through acknowledging the richness of your distinct stories that you recognize the profound beauty hiding within the folds of shared existence. The challenge is to retain the essence of who you are while harmonizing your melody with that of others. Drawing upon each reflection, a sense of unity began to burgeon among them, as they recognized their shared seasons of despair alongside their moments of triumph. With a newfound eagerness, Dinah, the village elder, stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with the light of wisdom. Our stories are entwined, indeed. They are the soil from which we grow stronger together. What if we embraced our pasts, the mistakes of Air, our own regrets, not as chains binding us, but as stepping stones toward transformation? A collective murmur of agreement followed her words, resonating deeply. The villagers began to remember their and one another's kindnesses, acts of love that sparkled amidst moments of hardship, illuminating the path forward. They understood that part of honoring their stories involved leaving behind the burden of shame and fear, stepping boldly into the transformative embrace of love and grace. Though shadows still hovered, a palpable shift ignited the essence of their gathering. Samuel voiced what many were feeling. It is not merely forgiveness we seek, but healing that spawns from honesty and transparency. What if we committed together to unveil our shadows, allowing the light of understanding to radiate within our shared hearts? The stranger smiled knowingly, captivated by the convergence of thought and feeling. Yes, allow vulnerability to guide you. The greatest gifts often hide within the folds of discomfort. When you share your burdens, embrace the uncertainty, and invite the light in, you cast out shadows. This is where true healing begins. In that instant, as the sun spilled golden rays over their collective silhouettes, a sacred decision was reached. They would carry Air's story not as a tale of judgment but as a narrative of understanding. They would rise from the ashes of sorrow, reconstructing the fragments of their hearts into a mosaic of faith and belonging, and so, the village cultivated once again the traditions of prayer, counsel, and gathering in the spirit of unity. They embraced their stories anew, weaving them inseparably into the shared narrative of their existence. In honoring Air's memory, the villagers dedicated themselves to maintaining open hearts and minds, ensuring that no one would slip into the depths of isolation and despair again. As twilight stretched its wings through the cozy village, murmurs of kindness and gratitude filled the air, rising gently toward the heavens. Inspiration darted among their hearts, encouraged by the realization that the journey of faith was not a solitary pilgrimage but a collective ascent toward understanding, grace, and joy. Each villager felt the weight of their shared legacy, a tapestry crafted from individual journeys intertwined, vibrant and alive. In the backdrop of the settling night, they gathered under the olive tree once more, not as separate individuals, but as a community aspiring toward a higher calling. The stranger, who had become a beacon of wisdom, nodded in approval, knowing the seeds of transformation had been planted. "Remember," he stated, his voice imbued with a deep reverence, "in the light of vulnerability, you are no longer defined by your failures but by your resolve to rise. Trust in that spirit of communion, let it guide you in the service of your community." As the stars blinked above and the cool night breeze caressed their faces, the villagers felt the profound truth resonate deep within. Every story mattered, every voice counted. Together they forged a sacred legacy of light, love, and understanding that would echo through generations to come. They stood on the precipice of a divine revelation, ready to walk the path toward a shared destiny, forging ahead with newfound strength, emboldened by the wisdom gained from both light and shadow, and in that moment, they realized the strongest revelation of all, that one does not simply dwell in the light without first recognizing the shadows, and it is within those very shadows that the greatest truths shine brightly, illuminating the beauty of their collective human experience.